For 3.5 months, we had my parents staying with us up in our attic. And on Sunday the 28th, they said goodbye and headed back to Portugal's when the ferries were able to run again. On the Friday before they left, my kids came into my room after I'd put them to bed, and Allegra said to me, "Zion is sad." He was inconsolable. He got into bed next to me and was sobbing, and Allegra angrily instructed me, "Tell Nana and Dada not to leave." On the following evening, the Saturday night, we had a special meal before they left, and Allegra burst into tears several times for no apparent good reason. And Zion said, "Why do Nana and Dada have to leave?" To this, my brother Paul answered, "Because God wants them to." Our family has been saying goodbyes like this for the past 22 years, since I went to boarding school when I was 11, later joined by my brother and then my sister, while my parents did development work and planted a church in Brazil. It's made us appreciate the time that we do get to spend together, and we have got used to the feelings that come with saying goodbye and knowing that it will be quite a while till we see each other and that we're physically quite far away from each other. But it's never become particularly easy. The day that they left, I understandably felt quite low. The kids were upset and I hadn't slept well. But I needed that reminder of what Paul had said. They've got to go because that's what God has asked them to do. And more to the point, we are staying because that is where we feel that God is asking us to be right now. But to be honest, it felt quite hard. I felt a bit hard done by. I didn't feel particularly holy about it. I didn't feel selfless or particularly joyful in the face of watching my kids' discomfort. I started thinking about how I could distract them from it all. I think a lot of us can think of times when we have resented being put through a difficult situation. And yet, we follow a God who says two things which seem to oppose each other, but that actually complement each other. Firstly, he says, "Pick up your cross daily and follow me." It shouldn't come as a surprise when we follow him that we encounter discomfort. The analogy he used was of a cross, which was the most brutal form of capital punishment probably ever to have existed. Jesus never claimed that following him would be without sacrifice. But he also says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Because actually, when we choose to follow him, we can let go of being in charge, of feeling responsible for everything. The pressure is transferred onto him. Kath and I have an ongoing bit of a joke, and it's a list that we add to of all the reasons why we never want Donald's job. And it boils down to the fact that the buck stops with him. We like that we don't have to deal with that pressure. It sometimes means that we don't fully agree with Donald about a decision, but we know that when push comes to shove, it will be Donald that has to deal with the consequences of that decision and not us. Following God is similar, but on a far bigger scale. He takes responsibility, and though we may not always understand why he asks certain things of us, we can rest secure that he sees the bigger picture and that he's ultimately working to build his kingdom, one that will see the sadness, the sickness and injustices we see today in our world eliminated. I may not like having to see my kids dealing with the sadness of saying goodbye again to their grandparents. I may not have enjoyed saying goodbye throughout my teenage years to my parents and my siblings. And this is just a minor thing compared to the suffering that some people endure. But I needed this reminder Because it's so easy to slip into a selfish view of situations like I did. Because when I stop to reflect and step out of my self-pity, I realise I would rather go through the sacrifice of being separated again than to be stripped or have my kids stripped of the knowledge that we are part of something far bigger, that we can rest secure that he knows what he's doing, that we don't need to understand it all, that there is a purpose beyond ourselves to our lives. Because at the end of the day, rather than protecting my kids from discomfort, I would rather protect them from the lack of purpose that comes from centering our whole lives around ourselves and our comfort. Jesus called us to live as servants, focusing on other people's needs. And this is the antidote to the epidemic of meaninglessness that huge swathes of our society are facing today. Jesus doesn't ask us to carry that heavy burden. His burden is light. He takes the weight. He just asks us to follow and take up our cross daily. So, what sacrifice are we being called to make? What's the cross that we need to pick up today? Not a sacrifice for the sake of making a sacrifice, to make ourselves look heroic. Not a sacrifice using the name of God to justify causing others to suffer so that we can do whatever we want. It's unlikely that it will be a sacrifice which is admired by mainstream society. But it will be one which says, not my will, but yours. One which says, I'm here to serve others, not my own interests, because I would rather hold to the purposefulness that comes from following you, God, despite the sacrifices.